Welcome to Father and Son. Welcome, Tom. Nice to see you.
Dad. Good to see you.
Well, I think it's D-Day today. It's Tuesday morning, and we understand that the three independents will make their decision this afternoon. What do you think?
Well, I know a week or so ago we were reasonably optimistic about the prospect of a coalition government. I now think, listening more to Oakshott and Windsor, they seem to be very impressed with the government's broadband plan. I suspect they're going to throw their lot in with Labor. And Bob Katter, I think, although it's hard to see him sitting next to Adam Bandt of the Greens, because of course the Greens are now in a form of coalition with Labor, but if Katter doesn't then side with Labor, he gets nothing for his electorate. So I think the most likely outcome is a Labor minority government. Having said that, it will be unstable, and of course at 2 o'clock we might yet get a big surprise. I mean, who knows, they might do a deal with Tony Abbott.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt the rumours all around Canberra are saying that the independents will run with Labor. I think it's staggering. I mean, if you look at the Senate votes in each of those three electorates, the coalition had strong majorities, and they're really going against, in my view, what their electorate would want them to do.
Well, that's right, and they've all been questioned on this. They just say, well, the electorate elected us to make decisions on their behalf, and that's what we'll do. And look, if they do support Labor and it doesn't work well, and I doubt it will work particularly well if that's their decision, I think it could come back to bite them a bit. I mean, they go from a comfortable life being independents to now being really thrust in the spotlight, not just for the past 2 weeks, but also going forward, because every vote is going to count. Every time Parliament sits at the moment. The UK experienced this in the early 90s when John Major hung on by a very thin thread. They used to have to make sure that parliamentarians from Northern Ireland and places voted every time. And the whips, the people who basically get people in to vote, will have to work very, very hard, because 1 or 2 votes who might be absent would be enough for legislation to fail. So interesting times.
That can occur if there's illness, sickness.
Yeah, look, they're talking about some parliamentary reforms to pair off people. So if someone's sick on one side of the house and someone from the other side doesn't vote. But at the moment we don't really do that in Australia. So look, it's interesting times. On top of all this, we've got the Reserve Bank meeting. In my market report, I've said that I think rates will stay on hold this month, although I still think they'll probably go up at least one more time before the end of the year.
Yeah, I just think the banks, once the government is formed, it's my view that the banks will put the rates up, regardless of the Reserve Bank, because their borrowing costs are going up.
Yeah, well, that could very well be true. And in fact, if the banks put their rates up, there's no need for the Reserve Bank to put the official rate up, because the damage will be done. Now, the weird thing is Australia still has this rapidly growing economy, and unemployment is headed towards 5%. In fact, the ANZ Bank thinks it's going to go below 5%, which is fantastic. But at the same time, the rest of the world is just mired. I mean, in the US, they're talking about new money printing. They're comparing what's happening in America now in 2010 with 1938. And of course, in 1938, the only thing that ultimately pulled the US out of recession was World War II. So hopefully that comparison isn't too valid.
Now, the other thing that came up this morning, which I haven't read the papers yet this morning, but I heard it on the news, that a study's been done by some economics group that says that the government, if it's Labor, will only get $2.5 billion per annum, not $10.5 billion, out of the mining tax.
Yes, I read that as well. Now, what is very interesting about the mining tax? So we had the original Resources Super Profits tax, which was abandoned along with Kevin Rudd, and we've had the new scaled down MRRT, Mineral Resources Rent Tax. Anyway, I think the reason that the big mining companies were quite happy to sign off on it is that they know
they've figured it out.
They don't think it will raise that much money. So they said, absolutely, we'll do this deal because it's not going to cost us that much. If the government's estimate on the tax was accurate, my view was that both BHP and Rio would have had to push up their profit forecast. They haven't done that. As a result, I think that notwithstanding what Treasury says, and Treasury's got a hopeless record at forecasting things, I think that the Labor government could find itself in a bit of a budgetary black hole because their mining tax won't bring in the revenue that was expected.
Which means they'll put up taxes, or they'll change the mining tax to raise more.
And then we'll go back to all those ads on TV, and they were very effective, helped bring down Kevin Rudd. So again, this is the reason, or another reason, why a formed government from the Labor side could be quite unstable.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I just can't picture Bob Katter sitting there with that brand and voting on single-sex marriages and all these sorts of things.
Well, Bob Catter was probably the star on the ABC's Q&A last night, and he was asked by someone in the audience about his view on gay suicide and things, and he sort of deflected the question. But yeah, look, they say that politics makes for uneasy bedfellows or whatever. we're
really
absolutely seeing this in Australia at the moment.
Yes, all right. Anything else on the markets? You've done the market report.
Well, I've done the market report. I just think it's important to point out, I've said this a number of times, the stock market is going sideways. The last couple of weeks has been a bit stronger, but August was not such a good month. The reality is that, as you pointed out with your comment on the banks having to put up rates, funding for bank loans is getting more expensive on global markets. The bank's margins are starting to go flat and possibly even compress. I know people don't believe that's true, but it is true. Telstra shares don't appear to be going anywhere because they're suffering at the hands of better competitors. So I don't see the overall stock market going anywhere for a while. And as a result, it's just going to be a very difficult time for business, for politics. But the funny thing is, I think this hung parliament's been a great thing. As a business person, I think it'd be great if we just had a hung parliament.
Why?
Well,
so because they can't do anything.
We don't want a government surprising you with all sorts of new taxes and policies. Just leave things the way they are.
Well, I think we've done enough for today. Now we just want to remind all our viewers that Father and Son goes back to 3AW this Sunday. Instead of giving us half an hour, a full hour. And it'll now start at 12 noon till 1 p.m.
That's right. So for Melbourne-based viewers, 6:93 a.m. For people interstate who want to tune in, you can go to the website 3aw.com.au and listen via internet streaming. So Sunday, midday until 1 p.m, Dad and I will be on Father and Son. And of course, we take your calls, so you get a chance to ask us questions on air.
We're going to deal with so many of the great unwashed public like
absolutely. That is what Talkback Radio is all about.
Makes it easy for you, but Tom's day goes from 12 till 6 both Saturday and Sunday.
Saturday and Sunday, yeah, throughout the summer months, midday till 6. And I tell you what about Talkback Radio, and this is a really important thing. You call it dealing with the great unwashed. I think our politicians, it should be compulsory for them to go on Talkback, because it's one of the few times they are forced to hear the concerns and the questions of ordinary people. And I think too many of our politicians have become rather divorced from what the average person thinks.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you were up at Bulla last weekend, and we had terrible floods, and there was a mudslide up there.
Well, it'll arouse no sympathy from anybody to see that a lot of very expensive Range Rovers and BMWs fell upon each other in this mudslide. The rain was torrential, and I've got to say, driving back, places like Molesworth in Victoria, which is very low-lying, I mean, the water was right up to the level of the road. All these cows were on isolated islands that used to be in paddocks. But the good news is, rivers like the Elliott flowing at levels that haven't been seen in years. Lake Eildon, which up until a few weeks ago was a dirt bike riding track, now is a lake again, and we have not seen that in the best part of the decade. They're saying that there's that much water in the Murray that's fallen below the catchments. It'll flow all the way to the lakes in South Australia, flush out where the river hits the ocean, and that's got to be a good thing.
I agree. All right, well, tune in on Sunday, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.